United for peace. Thank you very much for coming. Last autumn, December, I went to Vienna for a conference on the humanitarian effects of war. It shouldn't really be necessary to have such a conference, but sadly it is. And we met in the august surroundings of the Hofburg Palace with the beautiful ceilings, and this was once the centre of a great empire, an enormous empire that ruled a very significant area. And the Austrian government representative said Austria had no nuclear weapons, didn't want any nuclear weapons, and didn't think anybody else should have any nuclear weapons. And it's not a particularly left-wing government by any manner of means. They felt their security lay in not being a nuclear power. And then we had a day of presentations from scientists and environmentalists and peace campaigners from all over the world of what the effects of one nuclear explosion would be on this planet. The local environmental disaster, the loss of life, the loss of ecosystems, the damage to the economy, and the possibility of a chain reaction as a result of it. And we heard from people in the Marshall Islands, including its wonderful foreign minister, who as a child witnessed a nuclear explosion. We also heard from nuclear test veterans, not just British, but many others, who were forced, as part of their military duties, to observe nuclear testing in the Pacific, in Russia, and in other places in the 1950s, riddled with cancer, and sadly their descendants likely to be riddled with cancer as a result of it. Today we're commemorating Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Fireworks compared to the nuclear weapons that are now available. And we're commemorating those that lost their lives and the sheer danger and waste of nuclear weapons and nuclear war. When the 5 declared nuclear weapons states spoke, well, only 2 of them spoke in fact in Vienna, Britain and the United States, to the silence and consternation of the entire crowd, they said, we need nuclear weapons for our security. Interesting argument, because if you follow that argument, every single country in the world would have nuclear weapons to protect itself and its own security. What we were told the day before that statement was made, the sheer levels of devastation that would come from any nuclear explosion, the cancers that live on, as I've just mentioned, and all the horrors that go on with it. And then we heard from South Africa, from Abdul Minty, an anti-apartheid campaigner, brave people that had overthrown the cruelty, oppression, vileness of the apartheid regime. And he told the conference, we want to live in a world of peace. We don't want to threaten our neighbours, and we don't expect our neighbours to threaten us. Therefore, we have ended our nuclear program, ended our aspiration for nuclear weapons. We want to live in the continent of Africa nuclear weapons free, as indeed is now Latin America and large parts of Central Asia. And so we then move on from this conference, where he was greeted with acclaim by all those people there, and the utter silence that followed the presentation by Britain and the United States in effect said it all. Then in May we had the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is a very important document. It was flawed, as many international treaties are, because in a sense it said the 5 declared nuclear weapon states can do one thing, maybe later on disarm, the rest of the world must not develop or possess nuclear weapons. But nevertheless, it's an important treaty and a very important step forward. That conference should have made progress towards an international ban on nuclear weapons, an international weapons convention. It should have made progress towards a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, which is now more possible than ever following the agreement that's been reached with Iran on nuclear processing, and the real possibility of bringing about peace there, which would of course have to bring Israel and Iran and all the other countries of the region around the table. If that conference doesn't take place, if that disarmament process doesn't take place, there are serious dangers of nuclear proliferation all over the Middle East. There are countries with the money, the wherewithal, the knowledge and the know-how to develop nuclear weapons, and the obvious danger to the entire planet. So you have to ask yourself, what can we do about it? Our voices of protest are very strong, and we are very long-lived at doing this. Many of us have spent our entire lives campaigning against nuclear weapons, and I see young people in the audience here today. I hope you don't have to spend your entire life campaigning against nuclear weapons. I hope we can get rid of them before you get as old as some of us are here. But the cause of peace is something that is very, very important. And we've got to win people over to the idea that a nuclear-free world is possible, that nuclear weapons are not a defense, not a security, just an ever-present and very costly danger, not just to us, but to the entire planet. In 2016, the British Parliament will be probably, I say probably because these things often change, invited to vote on the replacement of the Trident nuclear missile system. And it would commit this country to £100 billion on that replacement programme if it goes ahead, including the running costs of the submarines and the weapons thereafter. It is an historic opportunity that we have, an historic opportunity for British members of Parliament to consider what is real security in the world. Is real security the ability of a society to provide housing, healthcare, social security, jobs, education, hope for its entire population? Or is real security to spend a phenomenal amount of money, which damages much else of our industrial base, on weapons of mass destruction that can only bring danger and threat to the rest of the world? I hope MPs think very, very seriously before that vote takes place. But I also, and I'm feeling the sharp eyes of Bruce behind me now, so I'll be brief. The point I want to make is this. Those people that manufacture the submarines and the nuclear weapons are technically absolutely brilliant people, incredibly intelligent, very well trained, very technically able to produce these things. Those are skills that must not be lost. Those are skills that have to be used for something else. Those are skills that we can use to develop our economy and provide real hope and opportunities for all the young graduates that exist in Britain, brilliant, qualified people, riddled with debt and unfortunately finding it difficult to find work. Can't we instead put those resources and that money into a defence diversification agency where we invest in green energy, we invest in high technology, we invest in medicine, we invest in dealing with the AIDS pandemic and so many other things around the world. We reconfigure the basis of what we're doing away from weapons of mass destruction towards promoting and using the skills of people to deal with the real problems of poverty, inequality, environmental destruction that face this planet. And I want that to be a central part of what we do. Because we live in a world where there is enormous danger. We live in a world where one war begets another, begets another, begets another. I was across the road in Friend's house in 2001 after 9/11. And I remember Bruce Kent speaking then, saying, in the case of Afghanistan, would we let slip the dogs of war because we do not know when they will ever get back. We do not know what the results would be. We let slip the dogs of war. We had the war in Afghanistan, we had the war in Iraq, we had the war in Libya, we have the war in Syria, we have the growth of dreadful forces, we have the sale of weapons of mass destruction or lesser weapons all around the region. And then we have the victims. Those people in refugee camps in Lebanon, in refugee camps in Libya, dying in the Mediterranean, trying to eke out an existence in Europe, and some ending up in refugee camps in Calais. Wars lead to destruction, destruction leads to misery, misery leads to refugees, misery leads to death, and misery also leads to uncontrollable levels of hatred. Can't we approach the world in a slightly different way? First of all, remember those that died from nuclear weapons in 1945. remember those that suffered from nuclear testing, and say it is not necessary, never again. And also say that we, as a society, will make our contribution to a nuclear-free world by fulfilling our obligations under the appropriate articles of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, by not just taking steps towards disarmament, but not renewing the Trident nuclear missile system. It is possible to live in a nuclear-free world. It is possible to live with real security. Security is not necessarily the ability to threaten and destroy your neighbour. Security is when you're able to get on with your neighbour, when you're able to recognise your neighbour's needs, when you're able to recognise your neighbour's problems, and they in turn recognise your needs and their problems. This all might sound to some people rather romantic and old-fashioned. I say this, it's absolutely practical how we face the problems that this world has at the present time. And in the current debate that I'm engaged with, it's absolutely fascinating the numbers of people who are coming out in their thousands because they're interested not in personal name-calling, not in abuse, not in that style of political and public debate. They're interested in ideas. They're interested in their hopes. They're interested in their opportunities. They're interested in using our energies to conquer inequality and poverty and protect our world from environmental disaster. They are the force of optimism and the force of hope. They're not the force of cynicism and naysayers. They are the people that have stood for so long for peace and justice and stand today, as all of us do in this park, under Millie's tree, amongst those that have spent their lives campaigning for peace. Gandhi's statue nearby, those people that dared to dream of peace, they're the ones who we remember. They're the ones that give us hope for the future. That is why we're here today, and that's why we're going to be here every year, as long as it takes, to bring about our dream, our collective dream of a world free of nuclear weapons. Thank you very much.